The air inside the church was thick with incense and sorrow. The organ music floated through the pews like a ghost, solemn and mechanical, devoid of warmth. I stood there at the front, next to Nick's casket, staring at the glossy mahogany lid as if I could will it to open, as if my son, my only child, would sit up and laugh and tell me it was all just a terrible misunderstanding. But the stillness said otherwise. Final. Unrelenting. The white roses I had chosen for his arrangement seemed too soft, too alive for the occasion. I had picked them because Nick used to sneak white roses from the neighbor's garden for me when he was little. "Only the white ones, Mommy. They smell like you." He was gone now. My baby boy, who used to fall asleep curled against me during thunderstorms. The boy who'd hold my hand too long on the first day of school. The boy I raised alone after his father walked out. And now I stood by his coffin, a black veil shadowing the grief that had carved itself into my bones. Next to me stood Ellie, my daughter-in-law. Her hand trembled as she clutched a lace handkerchief to her lips. Her makeup was perfect, soft, dewy skin, mascara just smudged enough to suggest sorrow, lips quivering in the way mourners find poetic. She had always known how to perform. Her black dress was modest, expensive, tailored to fit her like mourning was fashionable. People whispered about how gracefully she handled tragedy. "So young to lose a husband," one woman murmured, "and look how strong she is." I said nothing. I was too tired to argue with appearances. The rest of the funeral passed like a fever dream. Handshakes, murmured condolences, the tight grip of neighbors and coworkers who couldn't look me in the eye too long. A blur of faces. None of them Nick's. That was what I kept searching for. My eyes moved through the crowd like a drowning woman searching for the shore. I left the sanctuary quietly, needing air, or space, or maybe just to stop the world from spinning. The church bathroom was tucked away behind a narrow hallway, cold and echoing. As I stood at the sink, trying to breathe, I heard voices outside the bathroom door. At first, I thought nothing of it. People whispered all day. But then I recognized Ellie's voice. Light, laughing. "Honestly," she said, "I thought she'd faint. I was hoping she'd faint. It would have made my day." I froze. I mean, come on. That woman has been glued to my husband since the day we got married. Like I married both of them. Finally, I can get rid of that old woman. I've been waiting for this day for years. A ripple of laughter followed. Someone, her friend Grace, I think, asked something I couldn't make out. "No," Ellie replied, still laughing. "I'm serious. She thinks I'm going to let her stay in that house. Our house." "I don't think so. Her place is in a nursing home, or better, some retirement hell out in the suburbs. I'm done pretending to care." The laughter again. Light, almost musical. I stood there, staring at the sink, water still running, my hands clenched on the edge of the porcelain. This woman, this girl I had embraced as a daughter, had been standing beside me just moments ago, dabbing fake tears from her eyes, while secretly rejoicing in Nick's death, planning my exile. My body felt numb, my legs like glass. I turned off the faucet and backed away from the sink, careful not to make a sound. Was this real? Had I been so blind? I had accepted Ellie, welcomed her, smiled through her passive jabs at my cooking, my home, my presence. I let her take control of family dinners, holidays, vacations. I thought it was the price of peace. Nick loved her, and because he did, I tried to love her too. But love hadn't been enough. She had played the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law for years, and all the while, she had been waiting for this, for my son to die, for me to become an inconvenience she could finally sweep aside. I returned to the sanctuary like a ghost, sat stiffly through the last of the eulogies. When it was Ellie's turn to speak, she glided to the pulpit with that same actress's poise. Her voice trembled as she spoke of love, loss, and her incredible husband. She even said I was like a second mother to her. I watched her lips move and felt nothing but cold clarity. If she thought I would go quietly, she didn't know me at all. Because Ellie may have buried her husband today, but she had just awakened someone she would come to fear. After the service, while mourners gathered in the church garden for finger sandwiches and empty condolences, I slipped away into the car, waiting by the curb. I couldn't bear to be around them. Those smiling acquaintances, Nick's coworkers, Ellie's pristine friends with their plastic sorrow. I sat in the back seat, staring out the window as the world blurred past, cold and unforgiving. It hadn't always been this way. I hadn't always felt like a ghost in my own life. 5 years earlier, after Richard died, I had been swallowed by grief. My partner of 42 years, gone in a moment. A heart attack, the doctor said. 1 minute he was reading the paper, and the next, the coffee cup hit the floor, and everything in my world broke open. I held myself together for Nick, for the grandchildren, for the version of family I had always clung to like a lifeline. Nick called me daily in those first weeks. "You don't have to be alone," he'd say, his voice gentle. "Come live with us, Mom. Please. You're family. It's what Dad would have wanted." Ellie had been gracious then, her tone sweet as jam. "We've got space. You'd have your own room, your own bathroom. The kids would love to see you every day. Really, Louise, it just makes sense." It did make sense. And I was grateful. I sold our family home, the house Richard and I had built from nothing, down to the hand-picked tiles in the kitchen, the ivy-covered porch, the old swing where Nick used to fall asleep on summer afternoons. I sold it all, thinking I was moving toward something better, thinking I was needed. The proceeds were generous, more than enough to make anyone feel secure. I gave it to them. Every penny. "It's your turn now," I told Nick. "Use it for the kids, fix the roof, pay off your loans." I remember Nick crying, wrapping his arms around me. Ellie, dabbing her eyes, murmured, "You're the heart of this family." How poetic. How masterfully she played me. The honeymoon period lasted maybe 6 months. At first, Ellie brought me tea in the mornings, asked about my sleep. The kids would crawl into bed with me and watch cartoons on my tablet. Nick was busy, but he made time. Short walks together, long talks over Sunday breakfast. And then, slowly, the wall started to rise. It began with the subtle silencing. "Let's not overwhelm them," Ellie said, when I offered to help with homework. Then came the banishment. "She needs quiet, she's studying," Ellie said, ushering me from my granddaughter Lily's room. "We don't want to confuse the routines," she added, when I offered to babysit while they went to dinner. By the time Nick's diagnosis came, stage 3 lymphoma, my place in that house had already begun to shrink. My room was farthest from the others, my voice too soft to carry through the walls. And yet, I stayed. Because he was my son. Because I thought love was enough. I cooked, I cleaned, I stayed out of the way. Ellie made it clear that my usefulness had an expiration date. She managed his medication schedule, talked to doctors, made herself the sainted caregiver while I stood quietly in the wings. She filtered everything. "Nick's too tired for visitors. He said he wants rest, not long conversations. He's too weak to see you today." But I heard him calling for me. Once, at night, when the morphine hadn't kicked in yet, he cried out, "Mom!" from the guest bedroom they had moved him into. By the time I opened the door, Ellie was already there, her voice syrupy, soothing. "She's resting, honey," she cooed. "You need to let her rest." It was always like that. Ellie deciding what was best, for him, for the children, for me. And yet she dressed for war every morning, not a hair out of place. Red lips, heels, perfume. Who wears perfume to sit at the bedside of a dying man? She wasn't grieving. She was preparing. She took long phone calls in the garage, always locking the door behind her. Laughed when she thought I wasn't listening. One evening, I saw her step out in a tight black dress and high boots. "Book club," she said. "Since when do you read thrillers in stilettos?" I asked, my voice light but wary. She just smiled. "You wouldn't understand, Louise." And Nick, oh my darling boy, he was too far gone by then. The weight he'd lost, the way his cheeks hollowed, his beautiful eyes dulled by chemo and fatigue. He was slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't even be near enough to hold him. Ellie was always there first, always intercepting, always arranging things so that I became a stranger in my own son's life. I started sleeping with the door locked. She'd humiliate me in front of the children. "Don't touch that. Grandma gets confused sometimes." "Let's not ask Grandma, she's tired." Once, I heard my grandson ask her why Grandma cried so much. Ellie said, "Because she's old, honey. Old people are like that." But now I see clearly. She had been preparing for this. Not grieving, not caring. Replacing. And I had handed her everything. I had loved them, trusted them, sold my home, gave them my money, poured my soul into their lives, thinking I'd found a second family. But I hadn't gained a daughter. I had raised a lamb for the slaughter, and she had sharpened her knives in secret. But now I knew. And now I was watching. The night he said it was the last night I saw my son truly alive. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels thick, like it has weight. Ellie had gone to bed after fussing over his medication and fluffing his pillows for show. The kids were already asleep, their bedrooms closed off from everything, including me. I sat in the dim kitchen, nursing a cold cup of chamomile, staring at the flickering light above the stove, trying to keep my thoughts from splintering apart. That was when I heard his voice, barely a breath, more exhaled than spoken. "Mom?" I rose and followed the sound like a thread in the dark. Nick was awake. The door to his room was ajar, the hallway light casting a pale stripe across the hardwood floor. He looked so small in that enormous bed, smaller than I'd ever seen him, just skin and shadows and pain. I stepped in quietly. "You need something, sweetheart?" His lips moved slowly, like the words cost him. "I need you." I sat at the edge of the bed, my hand finding his instinctively. He blinked, eyes glistening. "I didn't want it to be like this." "I know," I whispered. "It's okay." "No." He swallowed hard. "It's not okay. Not with her." He didn't have to say her name. We both knew. Ellie. I stayed quiet, waiting, letting him speak when he was ready. His voice was weaker than I'd ever heard it, but his words were steady, intentional. "I changed something in the will." I felt my heart skip, but I didn't react. I kept my hand wrapped around his, steady and warm. "What did you change?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "Can't say. But it's there. You'll see. Just don't show her anything. Don't let her know you expect it." And then, in a breath so faint it could have been imagined, "I saw what she was doing. To you. To me." It took everything in me not to cry then, not to shatter in front of him. But I nodded, brushed the hair from his damp forehead, and whispered, "I trust you." His eyes searched mine. "Do you forgive me?" "For what?" "For not stopping it sooner." A lump formed in my throat. "There's nothing to forgive." He was asleep minutes later, his breathing shallow, hands still curled around mine. That was the last real conversation we ever had. I held that secret like a jewel buried in my chest, a fragment of him that Ellie didn't know about. Every time she smirked, every time she dismissed me, I clutched it tighter. Let her believe she had won. Let her build her house of cards. The day after the funeral, she strutted through the house with a confidence I hadn't seen before. It was no longer the home we'd built together. It was hers, or so she thought. She paraded through the halls, making phone calls on speaker, so I could hear every word. "Yes, the property's in probate, but there won't be any surprises. Nick left everything to me, naturally. He wanted me and the kids taken care of." She shot me a glance as she said it. "Of course," I replied blandly. "That's what good husbands do." I watched her over the next few days. She rearranged the furniture, threw out the sofa Nick and I had picked out together during his first year of residency, boxed up his books and shipped them to Goodwill, took down the framed photos of his graduation, and replaced them with minimalist abstract art in silver frames. She even moved into what had been my room, declaring it had better light for her morning yoga. The children barely spoke to me anymore. Ellie had taught them well. "Don't bother Grandma, she's resting. She gets tired, we'll play later." She'd whisper things when she thought I couldn't hear. Implications, suggestions that I was confused, forgetful, frail, planting seeds. "Grandma's been forgetting things again," I heard her tell one of her friends over lunch. "It's sad, but I guess that's what happens when people get older." That word, older, like it was a disease. She had Nick's death certificate faxed to the bank less than 48 hours after the funeral. "Time to wrap up loose ends," she told me with a smirk. But I said nothing. I kept cooking dinner, kept folding laundry, kept pretending I didn't notice the way she was already picking out new furniture and planning her healing retreat in Bali. Yes, Bali. She told one of her friends at brunch. I deserve something. I was practically a single mother by the end. She said it like he had been the burden. My son. Her dying husband. I didn't react. Because I was waiting. Waiting for the lawyer's call. Waiting for the papers to arrive. Waiting for the part of the story she hadn't read. The one Nick had left just for me. Ellie thought she'd inherited it all. That I was nothing more than a sad old woman who'd outlived her usefulness. But my son had whispered something different. And when the will was read, the real show would begin. I never knew how long silence could stretch until the morning we sat in that lawyer's office. The air so taut, it felt like the whole room was holding its breath. Ellie arrived 10 minutes late. Of course she did. She swept in like a breeze of expensive perfume, all sharp heels and tailored morning black, the kind that clung to her like a costume. Her lipstick was dark, her sunglasses were oversized. She removed them with the elegance of someone who assumed she was being watched. She nodded briefly to Mr. Branson, ignored me completely, and took the seat farthest from mine with a sigh so loud it might as well have been a declaration of ownership. I looked small in comparison. I'd worn one of Nick's favorite scarves, navy with tiny white birds, and the cardigan I'd mended more times than I could count. My shoes were scuffed, my bag old. I didn't care. Nick would have noticed. That was enough. "Let's get this over with," Ellie said lightly, tapping her nails on the table. "I have a conference call at noon." Mr. Branson, an older man with years of law practice behind him, and a face that looked carved from patience, nodded solemnly and opened the folder in front of him. "Thank you for being here today," he said. "We're here to read the last will and testament of Nicholas Harding, who passed on March 17th. As executor, I will be overseeing the division of the estate as per his legal and binding wishes." I saw the flicker of something in Ellie's eyes when he said legal and binding. She adjusted her posture and smiled tightly, like a queen preparing for coronation. I said nothing. He began with the formalities, small donations to the local cancer foundation, some keepsakes for a few old friends, a rare guitar going to one of Nick's college roommates. The room was still, heavy, waiting. Then Branson turned to the meat of the matter. "To my wife, Eleanor Harding," he read, "I leave 20% of my liquid assets. This allocation is made in acknowledgement of the years we spent building our family, and with the expectation that these funds will support her personal needs as she sees fit." There was no emotion in his voice, just the slow, methodical reading of words that now held the weight of finality. I glanced sideways. Ellie's mouth had frozen in a half-smile. Her eyes blinked once, twice. 20%? She echoed, her voice cracking on the second word. Mr. Branson, unbothered, flipped a page. "To my mother, Louise Harding," he continued, "I grant full trustee authority over the Harding Family Trust, which shall encompass all real property assets, including but not limited to our primary residence and secondary holdings. These properties shall remain under her oversight and cannot be sold, mortgaged, or otherwise transferred without her written consent." Ellie sat upright, stunned. The blood drained from her face. "This trust shall exist for the benefit of Lily Harding and Adam Harding, my children," Branson went on. "Upon reaching legal age, each child will receive co-beneficiary status under the trustee's continued supervision." He paused to let the words sink in. I didn't breathe. And then, my mother, Louise, will maintain full residence rights in the family home for the remainder of her life, with all expenses covered by the trust. No party may evict, relocate, or interfere with her occupancy for any reason. A strangled noise escaped Ellie's throat, something between a cough and a gasp. She looked at me with disbelief, her lips parted. For the first time since Nick's funeral, she didn't look in control. She looked cornered. There must be a mistake, she said quickly, her voice too high. That's not what he told me. Nick said I'd be managing everything. Mr. Branson didn't blink. The documents were reviewed, signed, and notarized 2 weeks before Mr. Harding's passing. I was present. He was of sound mind. She turned on me then. You manipulated him, she hissed, her tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. While he was dying, you got in his head. I stared back at her calmly. I never said a word. He saw everything all on his own. Mr. Branson cleared his throat. There's more, he said, flipping another page. 40% of financial assets, including savings and investment accounts, shall be allocated to a protected educational trust for Lily and Adam. These funds may only be accessed for schooling, tutoring, college, and related expenses. Control remains with the trustee. He looked directly at me. Louise. And the remaining 20%, he continued, is placed into a personal care account for Mrs. Louise Harding, intended for her long-term well-being, including, but not limited to, medical care, daily living expenses, and in-home assistance as she requires. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My hands trembled slightly in my lap, but I kept them hidden beneath the table. Ellie laughed. Not loudly, just a single stunned breath of disbelief. You've got to be kidding me. She's 74. She can't manage a trust. She's not. She's the only one Nick trusted, Mr. Branson replied sharply. Silence fell again. I looked at her then, really looked, and saw the truth laid bare on her face. She hadn't just expected to inherit Nick's wealth. She needed it. She had spent the past year preparing for this moment, rearranging furniture, pushing me out of the children's lives, crafting a narrative where she emerged as the grieving heroine who'd sacrificed everything. But Nick had known. Nick had watched, listened, and in his final act, he had undone every web she had spun. I was still trying to process it when Mr. Branson passed me a copy of the trust documents. My hands were trembling. I couldn't help it. I stared at Nick's signature, crisp and final on the page. Underneath it, in his handwriting, a note. Take care of them, Mom. You always did it best. I clutched the paper like it was a lifeline. Ellie stormed out of the office moments later, muttering something about contesting the will, her heels clicking violently against the tile. But I barely noticed, because Nick had spoken through the silence, through the sickness, through the pain, and I had finally heard him loud and clear. He had protected me. He had chosen me, and I would not let him down. The house changed the moment the will was read. It didn't creak the same. The light came in colder. The walls felt closer. Everything Ellie touched now had the scent of fury clinging to it. Flowers wilting faster in their vases, doors slamming harder, silence turning razor sharp. I kept to myself mostly. Cooked meals no one ate, folded laundry that wasn't mine, sat in the garden with cold tea and waited. For what, I wasn't sure. Maybe for Ellie to explode, or for Nick to walk through the door and say it had all been a terrible mistake. Instead, I got fire. It started the morning she cornered me in the kitchen. She was dressed for court, sleek blazer, high ponytail, that confident gait like the world belonged to her, and she'd simply misplaced the deed. She stood there, hands on her hips, eyes gleaming with hatred. You think this is the end, don't you? I didn't answer. She stepped closer. You think you've won? I looked at her calmly. Nick made his choices. She scoffed. Nick was sick, confused. He wasn't thinking straight. You took advantage. My breath caught, but I didn't let her see. You're wrong. No, she said, voice sharp as glass. You always wanted him for yourself. Even when we got married, even when we had kids, you wanted him to stay your little boy forever. You couldn't stand that someone else mattered to him. She leaned in, her perfume too sweet, suffocating. You poisoned him, and now, you're going to pay for it. And she meant it. The notice came that afternoon, a lawsuit, filed on the grounds of undue influence. She claimed I had manipulated Nick into rewriting his will, that he'd been emotionally coerced in a vulnerable state, that I was mentally unfit to manage a trust, that I posed a risk to my own grandchildren. I stared at the document for a long time, barely able to comprehend what I was seeing. My hands trembled. My ears rang. It wasn't enough for her to cut me out. She wanted to destroy me. She hired Caldwell and Hartman, a law firm known for brutal estate battles and cutthroat tactics. She had the money, and now she had the story. The grieving widow versus the manipulative mother-in-law. She played it well, crying softly to neighbors, telling them how hard things had been, how Nick's mother was deteriorating, how the will was so unlike him. She's confused, I heard her say to a neighbor. She forgets things. Sometimes she thinks Nick's still alive. It's heartbreaking. I heard things in whispers, from people I'd known for years. Poor Louise. She's not herself. She used to be so sharp. Ellie says it's a kindness, really, to get her the help she needs. Help. That's what she called erasure. And the children? She pulled them from me completely. No more tea time with Grandma, she told them. She's not feeling well. I tried to talk to them, slipped notes under their doors, baked their favorite cookies, left puzzles half-finished in the living room in hopes they'd come finish them with me. They didn't. Ellie's campaign was working. I began to doubt myself. Maybe I was too old. Maybe I had misread everything. Maybe this was just grief clouding my mind. Then Eleanor came. She showed up one morning with lemon muffins and a firm hug. Eleanor had been there when Nick was born, when Richard died, when I moved into this house 5 years ago. She was more than a friend. She was family. And once, she'd been a judge in family court. She saw right through the silence. What's going on? She asked, eyes sharp behind her reading glasses. I didn't want to tell her. I was ashamed. But eventually I did. And she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You need to fight." I looked at her like she'd suggested I run a marathon. I can't. I'm too old for this. You're not too old to defend your son's memory, she said. You're not too old to keep your home. And you are certainly not too old to protect your grandchildren. I don't want to drag this out in court, I whispered. I just want peace. She touched my hand. Louise, peace is not what she's offering you. She's offering you exile, isolation. She wants to take everything, and she will, unless you stand. I cried that night. Really cried. Not the quiet tears I hid in bed. These were loud, messy sobs that soaked my pillow and made my chest ache. I cried for Nick, for the home I'd lost, for the children I missed, for every Sunday dinner that would never happen again. Then I wiped my face. And the next morning, I called a lawyer. Not to hurt Ellie, but to defend the boy who had trusted me, to protect the family he tried to preserve. I didn't want a war, but she'd brought one to my door, and I would not be going quietly. It began with a letter, not a conversation, not a knock at my door. A folded piece of paper, printed in thick black ink, slipped beneath the door of the bedroom that used to be a sewing room. Notice to vacate. I stood there for a long time just staring at it. My name, printed like I was a tenant. My occupancy, described like a clerical error. 30 days to leave the home where my son had once sat cross-legged on the carpet, where we had cooked Christmas dinner together, where I had watched him waste away and still clung to the hope that he would wake up and smile again. 30 days. Ellie never said a word to me directly. She didn't have to. She made her declaration through legal channels, just like she made coffee. Automatic, efficient, soulless. I brought the letter to Marta, my lawyer. Marta, who wore sensible shoes and had a voice that could cut through marble, filed an emergency injunction. "She's testing boundaries," she said, "trying to see how far she can push before the court stops her." Well, we're stopping her. 2 weeks later, we were in court. Ellie came dressed for a performance. Pearls, black suit. No emotion except tightly pressed lips and feigned sadness. Her lawyer, a sharp-eyed man who looked more like a corporate executive than a litigator, tried to argue the house belonged to the functional parent, not the trustee. He claimed I was no longer able to fulfill the emotional and physical demands of the household. The judge thankfully disagreed. In clear, measured tones, she ruled that the trust's language was explicit. I was to remain in the home as long as I wished, and no sale or eviction was permitted without my consent. Ellie's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Not then. She said it later, in other ways. First, to the teachers at Lily and Adam's school. "She's not well," she said to the guidance counselor, her voice full of staged concern. "I worry about the children seeing her deteriorate." Then, to the neighbors. "She's been forgetful," I overheard her whisper to Mrs. Cartwright. "Sometimes she doesn't know what day it is. I'm doing my best, but it's hard." Then at the pharmacy. "She left the stove on again," she murmured, within earshot of the cashier. "It's just sad." And then to the children. I didn't hear the exact words, but I saw it in the way Lily hesitated before hugging me, the way Adam asked me, too softly, "Grandma, do you take medicine for your memory?" The first time Lily confronted me, she was curled up on the sofa beside me, her little legs tucked under her, like a bird on a branch. "Grandma," she said, "Mom says you might have to go away soon." "Go where, sweetheart?" She fiddled with the edge of her shirt. "To a place where people help you, remember things." I closed my eyes for a moment. I didn't want to cry in front of her. Instead, I placed a hand gently on her back. "Sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups say things when they're scared. Your mom is very upset right now, and I'm very sad. But I'm okay, I promise." She looked up at me, wide-eyed. "Are you sure? Because she said you forgot Adam's birthday." I hadn't. I had bought him a Lego set and hidden it in the closet because Ellie said it was too confusing for him to receive two gifts. I smiled anyway. "I remember every day I've spent with you both. I remember the day you were born. I remember the first time you called me Grandma. I remember the sound of your laugh." She wrapped her arms around me then. "I don't want you to go." "I'm not going anywhere," I whispered into her hair. But Ellie didn't stop. She became coldly efficient, monitoring my every move, watching what time I went to bed, who called me, how many minutes I spent in the garden. I started finding my mail opened, my magazines missing, my belongings mysteriously reorganized. She began correcting me at dinner in front of the kids. "Remember what I said about portion sizes, Louise?" "No. We had that conversation yesterday, don't you recall?" "Oh dear. You told me the dishwasher was broken. It was working fine." All lies. All designed to chip away at me, at the children's trust in me, at my own faith in my memory. One night, I caught her on the phone in the backyard. "Of course it's working," she said. "The neighbors are starting to see it too. A few more months and she'll be out." I didn't confront her. I refused to stoop to her level. Instead, I bought a small notebook and began documenting everything. Dates, times, conversations, witnesses. Marta called it my survival journal. I called it proof that I was not the senile old woman Ellie wanted me to be. Because the truth was, I had my flaws, my grief, my quiet moments of sorrow. But I wasn't unstable. I wasn't forgetful. I wasn't what she was painting me to be. I was a mother. I was a grandmother. I was the keeper of my son's last wishes. And I would endure. For Nick. For Lily and Adam. For the dignity Ellie tried so desperately to strip from me. Because dignity, unlike control, is not something someone can take from you. It's something you decide to keep. The rain started just after dawn, a soft patter against the windows that turned into a steady downpour by mid-morning. The kind of rain that makes the world feel quieter, as if the sky itself were holding its breath. Ellie had taken the children to school and hadn't returned. That, in itself, was unusual. Normally, she hovered, pacing through the house like a queen checking her kingdom for cracks. But that morning, she was gone. And I, for the first time in what felt like forever, could breathe. I walked into Nick's old study, the one she'd tried to convert into a yoga studio before the court order stopped her. The room still smelled faintly of him, cedarwood and coffee, printer ink, and that cologne he used to wear that lingered on his shirts, no matter how many times I washed them. Most of his belongings had been cleared out, either boxed or quietly thrown away when she thought I wasn't looking, but one box remained. A battered cardboard container I'd rescued from the garage, one she must have overlooked or, more likely, dismissed as junk. It sat beside the bookshelf, untouched. I don't know what pulled me to it. Maybe something in the way the light hit it. Maybe instinct. Maybe Nick. I knelt down and opened it. Inside, old appointment cards, medical files, a faded sketchbook from college, a cracked mug with "World's Okayest Doctor" in chipped lettering. And beneath it all, a thick white envelope. My name was written across the front. Mom. Just that. One word. And everything inside me crumbled and then rebuilt itself at once. I sat on the floor, legs folded beneath me, like I used to do when Nick was 5, and we built castles from couch cushions. My fingers shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, 3 pages of his handwriting, shaky in parts, stronger in others. Beneath the final sheet, a small, neatly labeled flash drive. Truth was written in his blocky handwriting, the way he always wrote labels, clear, direct, unapologetic. I read the letter once, then again. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Mom, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And God, I hate that. I wish I had more time. I wish I could hug you one more time and tell you how sorry I am that I didn't protect you better. But I saw everything, Mom. I saw how she spoke to you when she thought I couldn't hear. I saw how she isolated you from the kids, how she controlled every phone call, every interaction. I saw how you shrank, how you stopped singing in the kitchen, stopped wearing your favorite scarves, stopped laughing. And it killed me. I wasn't strong enough to fight her while I was sick. But I could still do one thing. I documented everything. The flash drive has the proof. Emails, screenshots, recordings, financial records, conversations between Ellie and someone named David. Yes, that David. And audio. Real conversations. She didn't know I had recording software on the iPad. I set it up so I could remember doctor's instructions. But it picked up more. You'll hear her talk about putting you in a nursing home, about how she planned to spin it, about how she'd make everyone think you were losing it. Use it. Use all of it. I'm so sorry I couldn't stop her myself. But maybe now, you can. I love you. Always, Nick. I don't know how long I sat there. At some point, the rain stopped. At some point, I found myself staring out the window, the flash drive clutched in my hand like a life preserver. I heard Ellie return. Her voice echoed through the house, on the phone, always performing, always spinning. But her words were a distant buzz. Because now, I had something stronger than anger. Proof. When she went to her room, I went to mine. Plugged the drive into my laptop. And there, neatly organized in folders, was everything he promised. Emails, photos, bank transfers from Nick's joint accounts to a hidden one in Ellie's name. Money that was meant for medical bills, used for spa retreats and hotels. Screenshots of her private messages with David Taylor, a financial advisor she once claimed was just a college friend. The tone of the messages left nothing to interpretation. When he dies, it'll be ours. I just need to survive the sympathy tour. She's ancient. I'll have her in a retirement home by Christmas. Then came the audio. I hesitated, hand hovering over the first file. Clicked. Her voice, unmistakable. It's almost over. I just have to keep up appearances a little longer. Once Nick's gone, I'll file for full guardianship, kick the old woman out, and finally have some peace. Second file. She's like wallpaper, harmless but exhausting. I told the school she's confused. Told the kids she forgets things. Once they believe it, the rest is easy. Third. She doesn't even fight back. That's the best part. Just nods and says, okay, like a good little relic. She doesn't realize she's already dead weight. I felt physically ill. I took a long, shaking breath. Then I picked up the phone and called Marta. She arrived an hour later, coat soaked from the rain, and listened to everything without speaking. When I was done, she looked at me with something I hadn't seen from her before. Not just legal resolve, but personal fury. We're not just defending you anymore, she said. We're going on offense. I nodded. The next morning, I handed her the drive. The war had started the day Ellie filed her lawsuit. But now I had the weapon. Nick had given me one last chance to fight. For myself, for the children, for truth. And I would not waste it. The courtroom was full. Word had spread through the community. Neighbors, former friends, even teachers from Lily and Adam's school had come, packed into the gallery like theatergoers before a tragedy. They whispered behind gloved hands. Some glanced at me with pity. Others looked at Ellie as though still unsure which side they believed. Let them watch. Let them hear everything. I sat with Marta beside me, my hands wrapped tightly around the worn leather of my handbag. Inside was Nick's letter, folded and refolded so many times the creases had started to tear. I had read it again that morning, not because I didn't remember the words, but because I needed his voice in my head. I needed the strength that only a child's belief in his mother can give. Ellie arrived fashionably late. She wore black again, as she had at the will reading, as she had at the funeral, always in mourning, always costumed. Her heels clicked with confidence. Her hair was swept into a soft bun, and her face was set in a mask of carefully practiced grief. She was ready for her performance, but what she didn't know was that today, her curtain would fall. Judge Morrison was already seated when the hearing began. An older woman with steel-gray hair pulled back into a braid. She was known for her thoroughness and her disdain for theatrics. I'd watched her in previous hearings. Eyes sharp, hands always folded, every word measured like a scale balancing justice. Marta rose first. Her tone was firm, but not theatrical. This wasn't a show. This was truth. Your Honor, she said, placing a folder on the podium, we respectfully submit newly uncovered evidence that directly contradicts the basis of Mrs. Harding's challenge to the will. This includes proof of extramarital conduct, financial fraud, recorded verbal abuse, and active plans to isolate and displace the primary trustee. My client, Mrs. Louise Harding. The judge blinked slowly. Proceed. Marta nodded to the clerk, who connected a speaker to the courtroom system. And then the voice began. Ellie's voice. She's like wallpaper, harmless but exhausting. I told the school she's losing it. Once Nick's gone, I'll push her into some nursing home in the suburbs. The kids won't miss her. You could hear laughter in the background of the recording. A man's voice, faint, amused. Marta played a second clip. This time, Ellie was angry, her voice clipped. Nick's already halfway gone. He still thinks she's some kind of saint. But once he's gone, it'll be my house, my rules. I'll get her declared incompetent if I have to. Gasps rippled through the gallery. I didn't turn to look. I kept my eyes on Ellie, who had gone rigid in her seat. Her fingers clutched the armrests. Her lips parted, her breath shallow. Your Honor, Marta continued, now holding a packet of printed emails. These are copies of correspondences between Mrs. Harding and one Mr. David Taylor, a financial advisor. Within them are references to romantic weekends, discussions of estate timing, and derogatory statements regarding both the decedent and my client. The judge frowned. Are we to understand the petitioner was engaged in an extramarital affair during the final months of her husband's illness? Yes, Marta said. And with the court's permission, we would like to call Mr. Taylor to the stand. Ellie's head jerked to the side. You can't do that. You. But she was drowned out by the clerk calling, David Taylor, please approach. The side door opened. David walked in with all the confidence of a man who had just realized his name was no longer private. He was younger than I'd expected. Polished. Expensive suit, nervous smile. A man who had gambled on a promise and now found himself seated at the wrong table. Under oath, Marta questioned him carefully. Mr. Taylor, can you confirm the nature of your relationship with Mrs. Eleanor Harding? He swallowed hard. Yes. We were involved romantically. During her husband's illness? Yes. Did she ever discuss Mrs. Louise Harding with you? A pause, then a nod. Yes. In what context? He looked at Ellie, then down at his hands. She said once Nick was gone, she'd have control. That Louise was a burden, that she was going to find a way to put her in care. She laughed about it. The judge leaned forward. She laughed? She said it was going to be easy, that she'd make people think Louise was confused. She had a whole plan. Ellie snapped. You lying coward! She screamed, bolting to her feet. You told me you'd deny everything. You said we'd be fine. The judge banged her gavel once. Mrs. Harding, control yourself. She's manipulating all of you, Ellie shrieked. You think she's innocent? She's a master manipulator. Look at her, sitting there like a martyr. The courtroom was frozen. I gave my life to that family, she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. And he betrayed me. And she gets everything. The judge's voice sliced through the noise. Mrs. Harding, enough! Ellie went quiet, trembling, breathing heavily, her mask gone, her grief costume shredded, and the courtroom saw her, really saw her, a woman who had planned, manipulated, betrayed. The judge turned to her slowly. Mrs. Harding, she said coldly, you've not only confirmed the contents of the audio recordings and the sworn testimony, you have done so in open court. The original will and trust were written with full legal authority and clarity. This court finds your claims without merit and made in bad faith, she continued, her voice like the closing of a heavy door. In addition to referring this matter for possible criminal investigation regarding financial misconduct and elder coercion, I am ordering an immediate freeze on all assets not protected by the trust. Your inheritance, pending review, is hereby suspended. Ellie's shoulders sagged as if the weight of her own lies had finally crushed her. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Harding, she said, this court offers its sincere apology for the distress this case has caused you. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The courtroom began to shift as people stood, murmurs echoing like waves. I remained seated, silent, still. Across from me, Ellie collapsed into her chair, weeping not from grief, but from the unraveling of the web she had so carefully spun. Nick had given me the truth. And now, it had spoken louder than her lies. The final court order came in a thick envelope delivered by certified mail. I opened it slowly, sitting at the kitchen table where Nick once helped Lily with her spelling words, where I used to place warm muffins by Ellie's morning coffee, back when I still believed she loved us all. Marta came by later that afternoon, her briefcase as always filled with precision and power. She read the order aloud while I watched the way the sunlight filtered through the curtains. The petition of Eleanor Harding to contest the last will and testament of Nicholas Harding is hereby dismissed, with prejudice, she said, tapping the seal with her fingertip. All testamentary instruments remain valid as submitted. The trustee, Mrs. Louise Harding, shall continue to serve in her full and exclusive capacity. She smiled at me then, small and solemn. It's over. The words didn't land right away. They hovered in the air between us, uncertain. Over. The lawsuit, the surveillance, the whispered slander, the fear that at any moment Ellie might find another way to unravel me. The weight of months spent defending not just my rights, but my dignity. It was all over. Ellie had no recourse left, no further appeals, no leverage. She was left only with what Nick had allocated, 20% of the liquid funds, deposited directly into a locked account that she couldn't touch beyond basic living expenses. The court had barred her from accessing trust properties. Both homes were now formally administered under my authority, with Lily and Adam as the named beneficiaries. She was also ordered to pay partial legal fees for filing in bad faith, a small but satisfying dent in her facade. I found her in the kitchen later that night. She stood by the window, glass of wine in hand, the light catching in her hair like the edges of a broken mask. She didn't speak to me, not at first, just looked out into the garden, where the fig tree stood blooming despite everything. "I suppose you're proud?" she said finally. "No," I said. "I'm tired." She laughed bitterly. "You always were the martyr." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. She packed quietly the next day. Suitcases lined the hallway like tombstones of a life she had tried to orchestrate and lost. She didn't say goodbye to the children, didn't hug them, didn't sit them down to explain. Just left a note on the counter, scrawled in a hurry, barely legible. "I need space. Going to Phoenix with David. We'll call later." She didn't call. Not that week, not the one after. She didn't ask how Lily's school play went, or if Adam ever finished that Lego set she bought him for Christmas, but never helped him build. She didn't ask anything. Phoenix was far, far enough for her to pretend none of this had ever happened. David had apparently found a job there. Something flashy. Real estate, maybe. Ellie followed him like she had always followed power, believing that if she could just start again, somewhere warmer and shinier, the world might finally give her the control she so desperately craved. But it didn't last. I heard through Marta's contacts that they lasted less than a month. Rumors of screaming matches. David hadn't expected to inherit the wreckage of a lawsuit. Ellie hadn't expected to be treated like a burden by a man who only loved her while she had money and sympathy. She deleted her social media within weeks. The last post was a filtered photo of her legs by a pool, captioned, "New Beginnings." And then she vanished. I didn't rejoice. I didn't dance in the kitchen or call my friends with news. I made tea, I folded laundry, I sat with the children and helped Adam with his reading while Lily braided my hair. Because what I had been fighting for wasn't revenge. It wasn't money. It wasn't even justice. It was presence. It was being allowed to stay in the place my son left for me. It was being allowed to hold my grandchildren and tell them stories about their father. It was being allowed to exist in peace. And slowly, that peace began to return. At dinner, the children no longer looked toward the door, waiting for someone else to enter. They laughed again. They asked me questions, trusted my answers, invited me to their rooms to look at drawings and books and the mysterious treasures they found in the backyard. One night, Lily crawled into bed with me. "Grandma?" "Yes, love?" "Are we going to be okay?" I tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "We already are." Because in the end, Ellie had taken so much, but not the things that mattered most. She didn't take Nick's love. She didn't take the truth. And she didn't take me. The silence that followed Ellie's departure was not empty. It was clean. It was sacred. It was a silence filled with potential, a silence that allowed things to grow again. It was the sound of a house breathing freely, of children no longer flinching when the wrong word was spoken, of a woman long bruised by guilt and manipulation finally beginning to heal. The first few weeks were difficult. The children were confused, clinging to the edges of questions they didn't know how to ask. Is Mommy mad at us? Did we do something wrong? What if she doesn't come back? I didn't lie. But I didn't hurt them with truths they couldn't carry either. Sometimes grown-ups go through things that make them forget how to be kind, I said gently. But your daddy never forgot. And I never will. They needed more than my comfort. They needed help to sort through the tangle Ellie had left behind. Broken trust, confused loyalties, a warped sense of what love looked like. So we went to therapy. The office was painted in soft pastels, with a couch that sunk just enough to feel safe. Dr. Avery, with her warm eyes and steady voice, became a lifeline for all of us. She asked questions that made Lily curl into herself at first, and Adam pout and cross his arms. But week by week, they began to open up. They told her about the fights, the times Ellie said I was too old, or too slow, or not all there. The moments she rolled her eyes when I spoke, or told them I needed rest, so they shouldn't bother me. They didn't understand how those moments had been part of a larger plan. But they remembered the hurt, and they learned that it wasn't normal, that love doesn't isolate, that family doesn't manipulate. One session, Dr. Avery asked Adam what he felt when he saw me cry the day Ellie left. He answered simply, "I felt like we were finally safe." I cried that day too, but not because I was sad, because for the first time, they could name what they'd been living through, and we could move forward together. Back at home, we rebuilt our routines, not out of habit, but out of love. We cooked together. Lily, ever the artist, started designing place cards for our weekly Sunday suppers. Adam took over breakfast duty, proudly burning toast and grinning like a king. I taught them how to knead dough, plant tomatoes, write thank you notes. They taught me how to laugh again. At night, they no longer asked if I'd still be there in the morning. They stopped calling my room Grandma's guest room. It became her room, because I wasn't a guest anymore. I was home, and in that quiet, I rediscovered parts of myself I'd nearly forgotten. I pulled out old sketch pads, my fingers rusty but eager. I enrolled in an art class at the community center, a room full of widows and retirees and dreamers. We painted memories and futures in watercolor and charcoal. My first painting was of the fig tree in our backyard, the one Nick used to climb, the one Ellie wanted chopped down. It bloomed again that spring. I also turned my eyes toward Nick's business. After the court finalized my role as trustee, I met with the company's staff. His crew was loyal, kind, and practical. Men and women who had shown up at his funeral in flannel shirts and work boots, weeping like family. They welcomed me. I didn't pretend to be the boss, but I showed up. I listened. I honored their routines. Together, we created the Nick Harding Memorial Apprenticeship, offering paid training to young people pursuing trades. We received our first round of applications in May, one from a shy boy named Mateo, whose handwritten essay made me weep. "I want to build things that last," he wrote, like Mr. Harding did. Every week, I brought the kids to the office. Lily helped design brochures. Adam became the unofficial snack manager, delivering juice boxes with serious concentration. It wasn't just a company, it was Nick's legacy. And now it was ours too. My days filled up, not with duties imposed upon me, but with purpose I chose. I volunteered at the library. I helped organize a neighborhood cleanup. I started hosting monthly dinners with other women who had been pushed aside by daughters-in-law, husbands, age, or grief. We laughed. We cried. We danced barefoot in my kitchen. One night, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were done, I stood by the window with a cup of tea, watching the moonlight spill across the lawn. Lily came to stand beside me, sleepy-eyed in her nightgown. She slipped her hand into mine and whispered, "You make this house feel like a real home." And in that moment, I understood. Ellie had left trying to erase me, but what remained was stronger. We had rebuilt the family she tried to break, brick by brick, hug by hug, therapy session by therapy session. We were laying the foundation for something real, not perfect, but full of truth, and love, and meaning. It started with a ring that sliced through a quiet Saturday morning. Lily and I were folding laundry in the living room, matching socks, trading stories. Adam sat nearby, building a Lego castle, humming tunelessly to himself. The house smelled of cinnamon rolls and old wood polish, the kind of peace you can't buy, only build. Lily's phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced down, paused, then slowly picked it up and walked over to me. "It's Mom," she whispered. I took the phone in my hand, looked at the caller ID, and then at Lily's unsure eyes. "Do you want to talk to her?" I asked gently. Lily hesitated, then shook her head. Not yet. So I answered. Hello? A pause. Then, Hi, Louise. Even her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Not broken, just faded. A version of herself that had been drained of power. I just wanted to check in, see how the kids are, see how you're doing. We're well, I said, calm, firm. They're doing beautifully. That's good. Another pause. Tell them I said hi. I did. I passed on the message, but neither Lily nor Adam responded. They weren't angry anymore, not in the way they had been in those early weeks after she left. What they felt now was deeper, quieter. They simply didn't know who she was anymore. After that, Ellie called about once a month, sometimes less. Sometimes she sent a postcard, always from Phoenix, always signed simply, Mom. She never asked to come back, never asked to visit. It became clear, even in her silence, that she understood something fundamental had shifted. She had chosen her path, and we had chosen ours. There was no bridge to rebuild, and in that distance, we thrived. The children, freed from the undertow of confusion and conditional affection, bloomed. Lily began writing stories, short ones at first, then longer ones, filled with magic and girls who saved themselves. She started a blog with her teacher's encouragement and published a poem that got read in morning assembly. Adam developed an obsession with science kits and declared he would invent a machine that made pancakes for dinner. His laughter returned, wild and uncontained, and he grew taller overnight, it seemed, his legs all elbows and speed, his mind constantly full of what-ifs. We went on day trips, museums, lakes, old bookstores. I let them lead the way, let them decide what adventure meant. One afternoon, Lily turned to me during a drive and said, It feels like we're a real family now. Tears filled my eyes, because she was right. For so long, I had lived at the edges of their lives, allowed myself to become wallpaper in the home I had helped build. But now I was stitched into the center. I wasn't just the grandmother who tucked them in. I was their foundation, and I was finally living for myself too. My mornings were my own again. I painted in the sunroom Nick had once promised to renovate for me, now bathed in light, splattered with color. I took my time, let the brush tell the story. My subjects ranged from fig trees and forgotten windows to the children's shoes left by the door. I began going to readings at the library, lectures at the university. I joined a book club that met in a cozy little cafe where they served coffee with cinnamon dusted on top. It was there that I met Thomas. He sat beside me during a discussion on Middlemarch, grumbling good-naturedly about Dorothea's lack of self-preservation. He had warm brown eyes, a voice that rumbled like a cello, and the patient manner of a man who'd spent most of his life listening more than speaking. We started chatting after every meeting. Then coffee. Then a walk. Then dinners that lasted long past closing time. Thomas was different. Gentle, unassuming, full of quiet mischief. He didn't flinch when I told him about Nick, or the lawsuit, or Ellie. He didn't try to fix my past or offer platitudes. He just listened. And when I cried, he handed me a napkin and kept holding my hand. The first time I told the children I was going on a date, they blinked. Like, a real date? Adam asked, clearly baffled. With someone who has teeth and everything? Lily added, mock serious. We all laughed until we cried. When they met him, they were cautious but curious. He won Adam over with a model airplane kit and won Lily over by showing genuine interest in her writing. Slowly, they warmed to him. One night after dinner, as Thomas walked out to his car, Adam said quietly, He's nice. You should keep him. It was the closest thing to a blessing I could have asked for. My days were full now, but not the frantic kind of full that Ellie used to create, spinning stress into power. My fullness was slow, intentional. Mornings with tea and novels, afternoons with school pickups and garden pruning, evenings with laughter, quiet rituals, stories shared over dinner, and always, always the memory of Nick. Not haunting me, but guiding me. Every time I saw Adam build something or Lily share her writing, I saw Nick's eyes, his tenderness, his spark, his belief in me. That was his true legacy, not the trust fund or the house or the business, though those gave us a foundation. His real gift was love, love that protected, love that endured, love that outlived betrayal. And now, through his children, that love bloomed again. I had been buried once, under duty, under grief, under someone else's vision of who I was supposed to be. But now I was alive.